Welcome, and thank you for joining me. Tonight, we'll drift gently back into the past, to a time of smoke, soot, and stark contrasts. A time when gaslights flickered in the London fog, when horse hooves clattered endlessly over cobblestones, and when the great industrial empire known as Victorian Britain was reaching the height of its power, and yet, so many lived in shadows. This journey will take us deep into the alleys and tenements of the Victorian slum. You will not find lords and ladies here, not at first. Instead, imagine yourself waking to the smell of damp brick and coal ash, surrounded by sounds of coughing children and creaking floors. Through this slow and steady passage, we will wander for corners of the Victorian world, starting with the weary lives of children laboring in slums. Before stepping into the life and pen of Charles Dickens, we will examine the strange, sour scent that once hovered over all of London, and then close the curtains quietly on the delicate, dazzling world of a Victorian upper-class banquet. Let your mind settle, breathe in slowly. There's nothing you need to do now, but listen. The world of today can fade softly behind you. Let the cobwebs of history draw near. Let us begin. Close your eyes now, if you haven't already. Let your breath slow, and your thoughts drift gently back in time, to the East End of London in the 1850s. You are no longer in a warm bed. There are no sheets, no soft pillow under your head. You're lying instead on a low pile of coarse rags and worn-out clothing flattened out on a wooden floor inside a room barely large enough to hold a small table, 3 stools, a bucket, and a single candle stub flickering with orange light. It's cold. There is no heat here, except for the few bodies sleeping around you. Brothers, perhaps sisters. A mother curled in a corner, her back turned to the draft that seeps through the cracks in the wall. A baby coughs, then quiets. Outside the thin wood-planked door, there's movement already, a low thump on the staircase, a groan from a neighboring room, and the gentle metallic rattle of a pail being carried down the hall. The sun hasn't risen yet, not that you'd know. The window is so clouded with soot and dust that light rarely visits the room, and even when it does, it enters only reluctantly. The morning begins not with brightness, but with sound, with rusted hinges groaning open in the hallway, with coughing, so much coughing. The air is thick, not just with smoke, but with the damp, heavy smell of wet wool, old boots, unwashed skin, and mildew. The scent of human life when it is pressed too closely together, when the ceiling is too low, and the window won't open. Somewhere in the corner, a shallow bowl of porridge left out from yesterday has begun to sour. It is hard to tell if the sharpness in your nose is coming from that or the pail of waste someone forgot to empty. You stretch, careful not to bump into your older sister, who's still sleeping. Her breath is shallow, her hands tucked under her armpits for warmth. You rise slowly, careful to step only on bare floorboards and not on someone's hand. Your feet are cold bare, except for a pair of mismatched wool socks with holes in the toes. You pick up your trousers from where they lay crumpled near the door. They're still damp. They always are. Nothing dries in this air. You pull them on quickly, and then your shirt, stiff at the collar from a week of dried sweat and dust. A threadbare coat hangs on a nail near the window. You take it, because it is your only shield against the chill of the street. There is no bathroom, no place to wash. A cracked ceramic basin sits on a shelf with a film of murky water inside. You splash your face, once, then twice. The water is icy, it stings, but it wakes you up. There is no breakfast. There might be a heel of bread, if your mother managed to save it. You check the table, a low crate with a plate on top. Empty. A fly buzzes nearby. This is the start of your day. You are 8 years old. Outside, the alley is already alive. The narrow passage between tenement rows smells of coal smoke, human waste, and wet brick. The street is slick with moisture, never fully dry, no matter the season. Rats scurry near the piles of refuse. You step carefully, not because it's unfamiliar, but because you know where the worst puddles tend to form. You walk past others like you, other children in stiff clothes, with boots that don't match, or none at all. A few carry sacks over their shoulders. Others carry buckets, or small tool kits, or wooden brushes. You are going to work. It might be the match factory today, or the docks if there's cargo. You might sell flowers on the bridge, or sweep crossings for a halfpenny if a gentleman takes pity on you. You might carry bricks at a construction site, or scrape soot from chimneys. Your job changes depending on need, but the routine never does. You walk down a long row of buildings, some tall, some sagging, each one stacked with as many families as could fit. Laundry hangs from rope lines like sagging flagstall shirts, old trousers, baby wraps. Some are frozen stiff in the cold. The sound of voices echoes everywhere, mothers shouting to children, men hawking fish or firewood. children calling after one another. You pass a narrow courtyard where 4 children are squatting near a pump, filling a tin kettle with water. One of them sees you and nods. You nod back. At the end of the alley is a shop. The windows are so dusty that it's hard to tell if it's open, but it always is. Inside, the shelves are sparse, flour, a few pickles and brine, bread rolls baked yesterday, or maybe the day before. You stop at the door. You have no money. You know better than to linger. As you walk, the smells shift slightly. Coal tar from a nearby chimney sweep yard, grease from a food stall just setting up. You hear a bell ringing far away, perhaps from the church or the mill. A cart rattles past, pulled by a tired-looking horse. Its hooves clack loudly against the cobblestones, and you step aside. The driver doesn't look at you. He's too focused on avoiding the puddles. A small group of boys gathers near the corner, watching a rat scurry under a crate. One of them shouts and throws a stone. The rat escapes. The boys laugh. Then they disperse, each heading off in different directions, to different tasks, different jobs. You keep walking. As the fog lifts slightly, you can see the factory chimneys ahead, tall, blackened, endless. Their smoke curls into the sky like ink bleeding into water. The smell of ash grows thicker. You cough. You always cough. The factory gates are open. A man stands there with a clipboard. You fall into line with the others, keeping your head down. The man barely glances at you. He waves you through. Inside, the noise is deafening. Metal clanks. Belts whir. The air is hot. Despite the cold outside, you can feel the heat from the machines radiating against your skin. The floor is slick with oil. Your job today is simple. Move the trays. Pick them up. Carry them. Stack them. It is not hard, exactly, but it is relentless. Each tray is heavy. Your arms are still sore from yesterday. You do not think of this as school. You do not think of it as punishment. It is simply what you do, what all of you do. As you work, the day stretches long and featureless. The light does not change. The windows are high and small. The clock is broken. Time is measured in tasks. When your hands begin to shake from hunger, you know that noon must be near. A bell rings. The line stops. The workers scatter to corners and crates. You sit against the wall, legs drawn up, hands in your coat pockets. Lunch is the bread your mother gave you, stale, but solid. You eat it slowly, chewing each bite longer than necessary. You sip water from a tin cup passed around by another child. It tastes of rust. There is no talking. Talking means energy, and energy is to be saved. You think of home, but not with longing. Home is just where the night happens, where the air is quieter, but colder, where you sleep close to others, and listen to the rain tick against the broken window pane. And soon, the bell rings again. It's time to go back. The afternoon will be much like the morning. You know that already. The trays will feel heavier, the air thicker, but there is little else to expect. This is your life, and for now, there is no other. Let us linger for a while. In this world of smoke and quiet exhaustion, the factory hums with life, mechanical, pulsing, unfeeling. But it is not alive in the way a field is alive, or a forest. It breathes only steam and soot. Its voice is iron striking iron, gears grinding without rest. Its warmth burns the skin, not the heart. You are inside it now, pressed between machines twice your height. Their iron bodies are warm to the touch, but they offer no comfort. You keep your fingers close to your chest as you move, careful never to let your sleeves catch in the belts. You've seen it happen to others. There are no walls of safety here, just low ceilings and oil-slick floors. The air is warm, but it smells of grease and metal filings. And despite the heat, you do not sweat freely, for the moisture clings to the smoke, making it heavy and bitter. You work in rhythm with others, most not much older than you. Each task flows into the next, and each mistake earns a glare or a cuff on the head. Your body moves without asking now. Your hands, though small, are practiced. They move trays, sweep shavings, and adjust levers. You are 8 years old, but your fingers look older, calloused, chipped, discolored where skin has healed over old blisters. Time passes, slowly but surely. The machines do not break, they do not tire, but you do. The bell rings again, and the motion halts like a breath finally released. You step back, lowering your shoulders. Your arms tremble. There is still no clock, but you sense, from the quietness outside, that it must be the long hour, the one before the light begins to change. You walk outside into a narrow courtyard of brick and smoke. The sky above is a pale gray, unbroken by sunlight. You hear a church bell in the distance, faint beneath the low roar of the city. Lunch, if it can be called that, is in your coat pocket, a soft roll of bread that has gone hard at the edges. and a slice of turnip cold and dry. You eat slowly. There is no rush, and no reason to save anything for later. Others sit nearby. One girl peels a potato with her fingernails. A boy chews a lump of beef suit. A few share tea from a chipped tin mug, passing it quietly between them. No one speaks loudly. There's too much fatigue and little to say. There is no joy in the food, but there is warmth in the ritual, the act of sitting, of resting, of breathing without purpose. Somewhere down the alley, a dog barks. A carriage clatters by. Then silence again. You think, perhaps, of school. You've heard of it. There is a church down the road that teaches reading on Sundays, but that is not your path, not yet. For now, letters are painted on crates and signs. You read them slowly, with curiosity more than comprehension. Salted pork, says one. Lamp oil, says another. These are the books of your life. The words you know are practical, necessary, not poems or stories, but warnings, labels, prices. You hear the whistle again. The moment has passed. You rise slowly and return to the gate. Your hands are stiff now, from cold and rest, but they will warm again with movement. Back inside, the air feels heavier. You return to your task without needing to be told. That is how it works. Instructions are not repeated. Everyone knows what to do, or they do not last. This time, your job is different. A supervisor gestures toward a low tunnel at the base of one of the furnaces. It's small, only a child could crawl inside. You understand immediately. He hands you a brush. The bristles are blackened from use. You kneel down and begin. The space is narrow and hot. You can feel the warmth even through your coat. The ceiling presses close to your back. You scrub the soot and ash from the inner bricks, coughing quietly so as not to alert him. This task takes time. You lose track of it. There is no way to know how long you are in there. Your body aches from the angle. Your hands sting from the brush. But eventually, you are done. You emerge, covered in soot, your skin blackened from chin to toe. The supervisor nods once. That is your reward. You do not ask for water. There isn't any. Afternoon fades to early evening. The machines slow. The whistles quiet. The air grows cooler. The day's end is near. Some children do not return home immediately. They walk the streets instead, trying to sell small items: a tin of polish, a pair of laces, a penny brooch. Some pick through refuse for scraps of cloth or coal. Others, older ones, disappear down narrow alleys with sharp eyes and hollow stomachs, looking for more dangerous opportunities. But you turn toward home. Your walk is slower now, not from choice, but fatigue. Your limbs feel heavy. Your stomach growls. Your shoulders sag beneath your coat. You pass others like you. Their faces are the same, smudged, solemn, half asleep. A woman sweeps her steps with a willow branch. A man slumps against a doorway with a bottle in hand. You keep your eyes forward. The streets grow darker. The lamps have not yet been lit. Shadows stretch long along the buildings. Your foot strikes something soft. You glance down a bundle of cloth, damp and torn. A kitten mews from within. It is not unusual. At the end of the alley, your building looms tall, narrow, cracked at the foundation. You climb the stairs slowly, holding the railing, careful not to slip on the damp. Your door creaks open. Inside, your siblings are gathered near the table. A single candle flickers weakly in a tin holder. Your mother is bent over the hearth, though no fire burns. She is stirring something in a pot. It smells faintly of onions and water. You sit down. The stool wobbles under you. Your back sighs. Dinner is served, if it can be called that. A thin broth, mostly water, with slices of root vegetable, and perhaps a sliver of meat. You hold the bowl with both hands, letting the warmth seep into your palms before taking the first sip. It tastes dull, but you eat every drop. You scrape the bowl clean, then set it aside. Your mother says nothing. Her eyes are closed, her head resting on her hand. She is more tired than you. One by one, your siblings curl up on the floor. The baby is already asleep, wrapped in a shawl. Your sister shares a tattered blanket with you. The candle sputters. The room grows dim. You lie down, your coat still on. There's no point in removing it. Your eyes close. The world is quiet again. Outside, the city continues. Wheels turn. Boots pass. Voices echo. But inside, there is only the slow breathing of sleep, of children who worked and ate and came home. And tomorrow, it will be the same. The sky above London fades to a dusky gray, tinged with yellow where the sun tries, in vain, to reach through the thick veil of smoke. Gas lamps are lit one by one, their glass enclosures glowing dimly in the gathering darkness. They flicker rather than shine, casting shadows more than light. You are still outside, walking slowly, shoulders heavy with the ache of a long day. The soot on your skin clings to your pores, invisible now in the gloom but felt with every movement, like a layer of grit that has settled into your very bones. As you pass the narrow alleys and crooked side streets, you hear the city begin to shift in tone. Morning was urgency, afternoon was clamor, evening is resignation. A slow descent into something quieter, not peace, not quiet, but a kind of stillness born of exhaustion. The smell changes too. The pungent bite of factory air is replaced by coal smoke from 1,000 fireplaces, roasting chestnuts on a brazier outside a pub door, fish bones sizzling in fat, the sharper tang of tanneries nearby, and somewhere in the mix, always, the inescapable scent of sewage, a sourness that drifts up through grates and into every crack in every brick. The homes you pass are close together, stacked and leaning like tired workers, supporting one another just enough not to fall. Curtains hang unevenly in the windows. Candlelight flickers within. The sounds that seep out are low and familiar. A baby crying, a pan clattering, a voice raised briefly then fading. You stop at the doorway to your building, tall, narrow, and wood-framed. The steps creak as you ascend, worn smooth by countless feet. The hallway is dim, lit only by a sliver of moonlight. Through a warped window, your room is on the 3rd floor. The climb takes effort. Inside, it is warm not because of any fire, but because your family has gathered close together. Bodies give off heat, and there are many here tonight. Your siblings, your mother, a neighbor woman and her small son, come to stay after being turned out. You do not ask why. There is no need. These things happen. The room is dim. A single candle still burns, its wax pooling at the base of a tin plate. Shadows dance on the cracked walls, revealing water stains and peeling paper. The evening meal is long finished. There is a half loaf of bread left, set aside for the morning. Your mother guards it, silently with her eyes. You settle into your corner. There's a space just wide enough for your body. A blanket of stitched rags is shared between you and your sister. You lie down without changing clothes. No one does. What you wear during the day is what you sleep in, what you live in. The candle is blown out. Darkness settles thick around you. But it is not silent. The slum never sleeps entirely. There are noises, soft, continuous, mice skitter in the walls. The wind whistles through gaps in the window pane. A man coughs in the next room along, wheezing sound that echoes like a warning. Further away, down on the street, you can hear a horse-drawn cart pass. The hooves strike the cobblestones in a slow, tired rhythm. You imagine the driver, hunched against the cold, his lantern swinging gently. You close your eyes, but your mind does not sleep yet. Instead, it drifts. You think of the things you saw today. A man asleep on the church steps. A girl no older than you carrying a bundle of sticks almost her own size. The flicker of firelight inside a baker's shop. A paper cone of roasted peanuts someone had dropped on the street. You think of warmth, and where it lives. It lives in the baker's oven, in the lantern glow of the man's cart, in the clasp of your sister's hand beside you, her fingers curled gently, unconsciously, around your wrist as she sleeps. And then, despite yourself, you begin to dream, not vividly, not brightly, but in a hazy, floating way that is neither wakefulness nor rest. The city breathes round you. The walls creak with the shifting weight of night. The rafters groan softly above your head. Outside, someone laughs, a brief, high sound, startling and then gone. You stir, but do not rise. You think, for a moment, of the world beyond this room. The places you've never seen. The wide Thames River, flowing brown and cold through the city's heart. The halls of Parliament, lit with gas chandeliers. The Queen herself, behind her palace gates. You wonder if her feet have ever touched streets like yours. You think of school again, the church school, with its clean benches and Bibles stacked in rows. You've heard the hymns floating out on Sunday mornings, sung with such gentleness. You cannot imagine singing that way. Your voice is rough, hoarse from soot and smoke. Still, the thought is soft, pleasant. You let it carry you. Time blurs. In the distance, a factory whistle cries out again, a reminder that the night does not belong to everyone. Some are just beginning their shifts, others are returning home. The city never truly sleeps, and neither do you, not fully. You rest in a kind of half-sleep, as so many here do, eyes closed, breath steady, body still, but senses always listening, because slum life teaches you this. Rest is borrowed, never owned. You listen for the coughs, for the footsteps, for the creak of floorboards that aren't your own. Some nights, fights break out down the hall. Some nights, someone knocks on the wrong door. Some nights, nothing happens at all. But always, you listen. And still, somehow, sleep comes. Slowly, quietly. as if slipping in between the cracks in the window frame. Along with the fog, it settles over you like a blanket. Your body softens, your breath evens out, and the room, filled with warmth from the closeness of others, hums gently with the rhythm of sleep. This is life in the slum. It is not pretty, it is not safe, but it is real, and it is yours. And as the final whispers of the city fade outside your window, as the gas lamps flicker and the rats quiet, you drift into the softest part of the night, and forget, for a while, the weight of the day. Before the fame, before the pen-scratched pages filled with orphans and misers, and before his name became as permanent as the bricks of London, Charles Dickens was simply a child. He was born in 1812, in Portsmouth, a seaside town lined with ships and salt air, but it was London that would shape him. Not the fashionable squares and marble-fronted banks, but the underbelly, the slums, the cellars, the workhouses. Imagine him now, at 12 years old. He walks alone through the city, coat too large, hair uncombed, eyes lowered, his hands are in his pockets, fingers curled around nothing. His boots are thin at the soles, and though his family is not entirely destitute, he is, for now, completely alone. His father, John Dickens, has been taken to the Marshalsea prison for debt. The law is clear and unkind. Those who owe and cannot pay are locked away until they can, no matter how impossible the task. Charles' mother, siblings, even the baby are with the father in prison. But Charles does not. He has been sent to work, not to school, not to safety, but to a blacking warehouse. You may not know what that means, so let's step inside with him. The building stands near the Thames, behind Hungerford Stairs, a place soaked in river damp and smoke. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of polish, sharp, acrid, vinegary. The floor is slick. The walls are streaked with paste and dust. Rows of boys sit at long tables, some as young as 8. They work without chatter, heads bowed. Each one is assigned a simple but endless task. Paste labels onto jars of bootblacking, a mixture of lamblack, oil, and glue used to shine leather. The process is repetitive. Pick up a pot, dip the label in glue, smooth it onto the jar, wipe the edge, stack, again and again. Charles takes his seat. The paste is cold. It sticks to his fingers. The paper is thin and tears easily. The foreman walks up and down the rows with slow steps. He does not shout. He doesn't need to. Time passes without distinction. There is no clock on the wall. The light from the high windows is dim even at midday outside. The fog presses in like a second set of walls. Lunch is a piece of bread, maybe a slice of cheese, if the foreman is in a good mood. There is no tea. The other boys are not cruel, but they are distant. They've been here longer. Some will stay here for years. Charles is different. He knows he's different. His father once worked for the Navy Pay Office. His family had a maid once. He owned books. Now he lives in a boarding house on Camden Street with a relative of the warehouse owner. The room is small, cold, and damp. The woman who rents it to him is not unkind, but she is not affectionate either. She prepares him meals plain, often cold, and says little. He eats in silence, washes his own clothes in a basin, and walks alone to work each day. Every morning, he wakes before dawn, dresses in silence, walks a long stretch through London's grey, soot-covered streets, past taverns still reeking of last night's ale, past chimney sweeps already at work, past windows glowing softly with the light of candles, behind which breakfast is being prepared for other children, not for him. He arrives at the warehouse, takes his place, pastes labels, listens to the scrape of chairs, the hum of damp wood swelling in the walls. Evenings, he walks back the same route. He tries not to think of the river too closely. It is dark and wide and unfriendly. At night, in the cold of the boarding room, he sits by a candle and writes. Not essays or novels. Not yet, but letters, scribbles, observations. He watches people, their shoes, their hands, the way they lean forward when cold. He listens too, to the grocer who scolds her apprentice, to the chimney sweep who whistles in minor keys, to the woman who cries out each time she bends to lift a crate. These sounds stay with him. He is alone, but he is recording. Week after week, the rhythm continues. No school, no books, just glue and paper, boots and river fog. His clothes grow thinner, his fingers raw. The paste begins to crack the skin around his nails. And then his father is released. The debt has been settled, mostly by borrowing from others. The family returns to a kind of half-life, no longer behind bars but not truly free. Charles expects to return to school, but his mother disagrees. She believes he should continue working. He is devastated. Years later, he would write of that moment as the great wound of his life, not the prison, not the labor, but the knowledge that she saw him as dispensable. Still, his father intervenes. Charles is removed from the warehouse, returned to education. He studies law briefly, works as a clerk, then as a court reporter. He begins to write sketches, short, vivid portraits of life in London. The first stories are signed only with initials, then with the name Bose, and eventually, his full name, Charles Dickens. But the warehouse never leaves him. It lives beneath the pages of every novel. It lingers in the faces of his orphans, his clerks, his urchins and misers. He once wrote, "The deep remembrance of the sense I had of being utterly neglected and hopeless cannot be reasoned away. It is that memory quiet, unshakable, that made him a writer, a child in a damp room, with paste on his fingers and fog at the window, learning how to see the world with eyes wide open, and to never forget." It is 1836. The city is swelling, factories humming louder, streets thickening with people, soot curling into the sky like ink into water. And into this world of bustle and grind walks a young man with a fast pen and a sharp, quiet grief. Charles Dickens is in his early 20s now. He walks with purpose through London's lanes. He wears gloves, usually, carries a walking stick, neatly polished. His hair is combed and parted. He is no longer the boy pasting labels in silence. He is a journalist now, a writer, a sketcher of life's unnoticed corners. But he is always watching, always remembering. His early published works, collected under the title Sketches by Bose, do not shout, they do not cry. They observe a coachman with crooked teeth, a mother tightening her shawl over a sick child, a pickpocket slipping into a crowd. He records them all with quiet dignity. The city is not romantic here. It is real, layered, alive in strange and uncomfortable ways. And the people are drawn with such precision that even when they are fictional, they seem remembered rather than invented. Then comes 1837, and the Pickwick Papers. It begins as a light-hearted serial, a gentleman's comic travelogue, but slowly and gently, Charles weaves in more: the ragged boy bootblacker, the drunken landlord, the weary washerwoman. Behind the humor lies a pulse, a concern, a message, and readers begin to listen, not all at once, but steadily. They are drawn in by the ease of his voice, and kept there by the echo of something deeper, an ache they recognize, perhaps, though they cannot name it. Charles Dickens is becoming a voice, but it is not his voice alone. He is writing on behalf of thousands of the factory boys and match girls, the debtors and destitute, the tired widows and the silent children with hands raw from scrubbing stairs. He remembers them. He is them, and they are never far from his pen. Let us pause now, and walk with him. It is early morning, and he rises before the city stirs. He is an inveterate walker. Some say he walks 20 miles in a day, or more, not hurriedly, not with sport in mind, but with that same old attentiveness. The boy who once walked to the warehouse at Hungerford now walks for purpose, and perhaps for peace. He walks the bridges, the alleys, the market rows. He sees the stalls of fruit set out beneath heavy fog, the child asleep against a barrel, the woman selling matches from a tin cup. He makes mental notes. Sometimes, he mutters lines to himself. Sometimes, he stops to write a word in a notebook, his mind always humming. The city is his library now, and as his stories grow more ambitious, so too does his mission. In Oliver Twist, he presents an orphan hungry, silent, bewildered. Oliver's life in the workhouse is not dramatized. It is simply shown. The bowl of gruel, the low murmur of hunger, the astonishment when a child dares ask for more. "Please, sir," Oliver says, "I want some more." It is not the cry of rebellion. It is the whisper of need, and that whisper, once printed, reverberates. Readers across England, and then beyond, begin to feel what Dickens felt. They begin to see the slums not as distant misfortunes, but as near truths. They begin to question the poor laws, the workhouse system, the cruelty of silence. Dickens, by now, is not only popular, he is influential. He meets with reformers. He writes essays between novels. He begins his own journal, Household Words, where fiction and fact sit side by side. In every tale, a cause; in every sentence, a memory. But his work is not only about injustice, it is about the rhythms of life within it. He never paints the poor as purely tragic. He gives them quirks, humor, kindness, laziness, even flaws. He shows the full tapestry of humanity, not as idealized figures, but as real people muddling through hardship with tired grace. In David Copperfield, he turns inward, telling his own story through the lens of fiction. We meet David as a child, abandoned, lost, working in a bottling factory, just as Charles once did. But unlike in real life, David is rescued. He finds support. He rises. It is the alternate ending Dickens never had, and it comforts him, because even the strongest pens sometimes long for healing. By now, he is wealthy. He dines with politicians, attends royal receptions, commands speaking fees that astonish. He is photographed in velvet waistcoats, reviewed in every major paper, read by chimney light in country inns and gaslight in New York parlors. But fame does not soften his memories. He still visits the courts, still watches the poorhouses, still walks the streets at dawn, in private. He carries a visiting card that reads, Charles Dickens, Office of the Poor Man's Friend. Whether official or poetic, the sentiment is clear. He remembers the blacking warehouse. He remembers the paste, the cold, the way silence wrapped around his shoulders like a second coat. And because of that, he keeps writing. By the middle of his life, Charles Dickens had become a household name across two continents. His books were published in serialized installments, devoured by eager readers. Families would gather in parlors and taverns to hear them read aloud, line by line, week after week. Children named after his characters grew up in mining towns and merchant cities alike. Even Queen Victoria read his work, and yet even as he was celebrated, even as his fame rose higher than he could have ever imagined, there was something that never rose with it: peace. Dickens was not a man at ease. His energy was relentless. He wrote constantly, often working on multiple books at once. He edited journals, gave public readings, advised reformers, and penned letters late into the night. His schedule was rigid, almost obsessive, and always, at the core of it, there was motion. He could not sit still for long. His walking, like his writing, was compulsive. He sometimes walked through the city from dusk until dawn. Those who knew him remarked on this restlessness. He laughed easily in company, they said, but his eyes were rarely still. He was rarely quiet for long. He was always looking, as though searching for something just out of sight, or perhaps trying to outrun something that followed. The blacking warehouse, even decades later, he could not speak of it without trembling. He rarely told anyone, for years, not even his wife. When he finally confessed it to a close friend, his biographer, John Forster, it was in halting words, as if the memory itself was too painful to speak aloud. He had lived through it, but he had never truly left it behind. He described it as a stain, something that shaped every part of him, not just his writing, but his very soul. My whole nature was so penetrated with the grief and humiliation that even now, famous and cherished as I am, I often forget in my dreams that I have a dear wife and children, and wander desolately back to that time of my life. Even in his dreams, he returned to that cold room, that sour paste, that empty hunger, and so, he kept writing, not just for success, not even just for reform, but because writing was the only way to name what could not be said. Yet for all his compassion outwardly for the orphans and beggars of his books, his personal life was not untouched by conflict. He married young, to Catherine Hogarth. They had 10 children together. For many years, she stood beside him as he wrote and traveled, raised their children largely alone, and endured the public life that Dickens demanded. But over time, something fractured. He became distant, demanding. He grew frustrated with the chaos of his own growing family, blaming Catherine unfairly for the noise and disruption that surrounded him. Eventually, he separated from her, quietly at first, then very publicly. He insisted, in printed statements, that she was ill-suited to the life he led, that they had grown apart. He published letters defending his choices. Many readers believed him, but others, especially those who had known them both, saw the shadow beneath his version of events. He was, as always, protecting the narrative. It was a pattern he would repeat, rewriting discomfort, sanding down contradictions. He once said he wished to be remembered only as a man who felt deeply for the poor, and yet, within his own home, many of his children grew distant. One would say that he loved the world more than he loved us. That may not have been entirely fair, but it was not entirely untrue. Dickens gave so much of himself to the imagined child, the orphan, the street boy, the forgotten, and often seemed to struggle with the actual, tangible, imperfect children at his table. Perhaps because they did not allow him to be the rescuer. They did not live within a story he could control, and still, he kept walking, into middle age, and then later years. He continued his long walks through London at all hours. The fog no longer frightened him. It embraced him. It hid him. He knew every alley, every bridge, every sound the city made in sleep. And as he walked, he thought of the past, of the warehouse, of Oliver and Pip and David, of the choices he had made, of the love he had offered and withheld. He gave public readings, now dramatic performances of his own stories, in theaters, in lecture halls. Audiences wept at the death of little Nell. They gasped as he channeled the twisted voice of Bill Sikes. But these readings exhausted him. Each one drained something. He gave them anyway, because they paid well, because the people loved them, because, perhaps, he could not stop. In 1865, he survived a railway accident. His train derailed on a bridge, and he crawled through wreckage to help the injured. He was never the same after that. His health declined rapidly. Chest pains, fatigue, numbness in his limbs. But he continued to write, even as his hands trembled, even as his heart began to fail. On June 9, 1870, Charles Dickens died quietly at his home in Kent. He was 58 years old. At his request, there was no grand funeral, but public grief was vast. Thousands lined the streets as he was laid to rest in Westminster Abbey, as Poets' Corner, a place of honor, not far from Shakespeare. There, etched in stone, is the simple truth. He was a sympathizer with the poor, the suffering, and the oppressed. But there is more to the story. There is the silence of the boarding house, the bitter paste of bootblacking, the mother who told him to keep working. There is the child in every novel, waiting to be seen, waiting to be saved. There is the man walking alone through the fog, searching for peace. And there is the voice quiet, unwavering, that carried millions with it, not because it shouted, but because it remembered. The year is 1858. London is swollen, its population nearing 3 million souls, its buildings stretching farther than ever before, and its streets humming with every sound of the modern age. Omnibuses rattle over stone, steamships chug along the Thames, trains cry out from the arches of the city's many bridges, and yet, beneath this outward energy lies something hidden, something older, something festering, the River Thames. You might picture water when you hear the word river, a gentle flow, a cool gleam beneath the sunlight. But this river is no longer blue. It is thick and brown, crawling sluggishly between the embankments. It does not shimmer, it oozes. On hot days, it bubbles. Its surface carries more than boats, more than fish, which have long since vanished. It carries death, waste, a history of neglect. And in the summer of 1858, the air itself begins to speak, not in words, but in odor. A stench rises from the river like a warning, not sharp like smoke or sour like vinegar, but dull, dense, rotting. It clings to clothes, it creeps through windows, it nestles in the back of the throat. People call it simply the Great Stink. The causes are not mysterious. For decades, London has been pouring its waste, human, animal, industrial, directly into the Thames. Chamber pots are emptied into gutters. Gutters flow into sewers. Sewers, such as they are, flow into the river. And the river, being slow and wide and already burdened, no longer cleans itself. Dead dogs, slaughterhouse runoff, factory dye, rotting vegetables, fish heads, horse manure, everything ends up in the same place. In years past, people lived with it. They built higher windows. They pinched their noses. They assumed it was simply the price of progress. But this summer is different. The heat has come early, long, dry days, no rain to carry the filth downstream, just sun and rot, and the steady warming of what should never have been warmed. And something changes. The river begins to speak more loudly. At Westminster, where the Parliament buildings sit, directly along the riverbank, the members of Parliament can no longer ignore the smell. They try. They soak curtains in chloride of lime, a harsh disinfectant. They hang cloths soaked in carbolic acid. They debate with windows open, then closed, then open again. But still, the smell comes. It seeps through stone. One MP writes that the stink is so strong, one can hardly sit in a house without a handkerchief pressed against the face. Another calls it the most disgusting and inhuman atmosphere ever endured by men in a civilized nation. The river has become a protester, a silent, gaseous one. And for the first time in history, it is not the cries of the poor, or the press of disease, but the unbearable smell that forces Parliament to act. What cholera could not do, and death could not prompt, odor does. But to understand just how strange and overdue this moment is, we must pause. We must go backward, slowly, into the city's bowels. London, like many old cities, grew before planning existed. Streets were narrow, sewers were ancient brick-lined channels built for rainwater, not human waste. Some were centuries old. As population swelled, new buildings were added atop old drains. New homes connected pipes wherever they could. Privy's outdoor toilets were shared by dozens of people. When they overflowed, they were emptied into nearby streams, ditches, or straight into the sewers. But not all sewers were even connected to the river. Some simply sat, stagnant, quietly fermenting. And with the rise of indoor plumbing, things got worse. Water closet surly flush toilets were considered modern, convenient, but they produced far more waste. And all that waste needed somewhere to go. So, it went where everything else went, to the Thames. In effect, the river became the city's toilet. For years, the poor suffered most. Their homes flooded with waste during storms. Their children played near open drains. Their drinking water came from the same river that received their sewage. And cholera came with it. In the early 1830s, and again in the 1840s, cholera swept through the city in waves. Thousands died quickly, silently, agonizingly. The disease struck fast and showed no mercy. Rich and poor alike perished, though the poor bore the greatest toll, and yet, authorities believed the cause was miasma. Bad air, foul smells, they said, were the carriers of disease. They were partly right. The smells were a sign, but not the cause. It would take years before a stubborn physician named John Snow would map the pattern of a cholera outbreak to a single water pump and suggest that the disease was waterborne, not airborne. But even then, his theory was dismissed by many. It would take something stronger than evidence to change the system. It would take a stench so profound that Parliament itself could not function. And so, in the summer of 1858, London reached its breaking point, not from morality, not from outrage, but from smell. And for the first time, the city prepared to act not with a quick fix or a palliative but with a plan to change everything. Underground, to rebuild the veins and arteries of London from beneath, to give the city a system worthy of its people. And in the quiet corridors of Parliament behind the soaked curtains and vinegar-soaked handkerchiefs, the name of a man is whispered. Joseph Bazalgette, a civil engineer, a man of precision, and a man with a plan. The year is 1859. The stench has passed for now. A stretch of cooler weather and a brief rise in the river as flow have washed away some of the worst odors. Parliament is open again. The curtains are drawn back. Windows are opened cautiously. But the memory lingers, and in this lull, action quietly begins. In a modest office, not far from the river, a man reviews a set of blueprints, long sheets of linen paper stretched across a drafting table. His sleeves are rolled, his spectacles low on his nose, his pencil is sharp, always sharp. His name is Joseph Bazalgette. He is not a politician, not a nobleman, not a writer or a reformer or a crusader. He is an engineer, and this is his moment. Bazalgette had worked for the Metropolitan Board of Works for several years, slowly rising through the ranks by sheer diligence. He was not flamboyant. He did not give speeches, but he was relentless. He was a man who understood systems not just in theory, but in practice. And now, he is tasked with an impossible job: to clean London, not with soap, not with fines or sermons or moral campaigns, but with brick, with stone, with mathematics and sweat and foresight. His plan is ambitious, more ambitious than anything London has attempted beneath its own streets. He proposes the construction of more than 1,300 miles of sewers, not open ditches, not shallow channels, but wide, arched tunnels, built of millions of bricks, sloped gently by precise degrees to ensure flow, not too fast, not too slow. He divides the city into districts. Each district will have intercepting sewers, large conduits that catch waste before it reaches the river. These intercepting sewers will run parallel to the Thames, gently guiding the flow eastward. At the far end of the city, beyond the dense neighborhoods, there will be pumping stations. These grand buildings, ornate like palaces but filled with machinery, will lift the sewage high enough to be released downstream, far from the city's heart. Eventually, the waste will be treated, but for now, the goal is simple: move it away, far enough to stop the stench, far enough to stop the sickness, and, perhaps most importantly, far enough that it is no longer seen. It is not an easy task. The ground beneath London is old, uneven, laced with cellars, catacombs, and centuries of forgotten construction. There are water pipes, gas lines, train tunnels, ancient Roman walls. Every foot of earth is a question mark. Bazalgette surveys it all. He knows every inch must be planned, every curve must be calculated. A slope too steep will erode the brick. A slope too shallow will allow waste to stagnate. And so he draws and draws again. When his team brings him a calculation, he double-checks it. When asked how large to build the tunnels, he overbuilds them, doubling the width he believes is needed. Because, he says quietly, we are not building for today, we are building for the future. He is right. The construction begins in stages. Workmen dig deep trenches, sometimes 40 feet below the surface. They dig by hand, with pickaxes and shovels, hauling earth in wheelbarrows. Above them, wagons rattle by, children play. London life continues, oblivious. In the trenches, it is dark, damp, dangerous. There are cave-ins, floods, gas leaks. And still the work goes on. Bricklayers set millions of bricks each by hand, forming the sweeping arches of the tunnels. They use Roman cement, chosen for its strength in wet conditions. The bricks themselves are curved, designed to fit the tunnels bend perfectly. Overhead, streets are reinforced with wooden beams and metal braces. Some roads must be closed entirely, and yet, the city does not collapse, because Bazalgette plans every detail. In 1865, the first major section is completed. It includes the Victoria Embankment to Grand Riverside promenade that hides, beneath its elegant lamps and stone balustrades, a massive sewer conduit. The public marvels at the embankment. They stroll along its new pavement. They enjoy the view of the river, now less foul, less threatening, but few know what lies beneath their feet. And that is exactly as Bazalgette intended. For him, the greatest success is that the system disappears, that it works silently, that it allows the city to breathe again, without ever demanding attention. The pumping stations are completed next. Most famous among them is the Crossness pumping station, near Abbey Wood. You might imagine a dark, oily chamber, filled with groaning machines. But Crossness is more like a cathedral. Its iron beams are painted in reds and greens. Its railings are filigreed. Its columns rise like trees. Because Bazalgette believed beauty and function could coexist even underground. Their massive beam engines powered by steam lift millions of gallons of sewage every day. The sound is rhythmic, heavy, like the breath of a giant, steady and low. The waste is then carried down out of sight past Barking, past Dagenham, where the tides of the sea carry it away. It is not perfect, but it is a beginning. By the time the network is completed, more than 318 million bricks have been laid, 82 miles of intercepting sewers, hundreds of miles of street-level connections, and the city has changed. The smell no longer chokes the river. Cholera outbreaks decline sharply, flooding lessens, and beneath the bustle and clang of London's surface life, Bazalgette's quiet empire hums along untouched, unthanked, and utterly essential. He receives a knighthood, but not fame. He does not seek it. He returns to his home, tends to his garden, visits the construction sites even in retirement, reviews new proposals, answers letters with his meticulous hand, and long after he is gone, long after his tunnels have aged a century, they remain, still flowing, still carrying the city's hidden burden, still doing the quiet work of health, of dignity, of protection. In the years that followed the completion of Bazalgette's sewer system, London began to breathe differently. It was not immediate, this change. It came softly, like mist, like a tide receding after flood. The river, once a dark ribbon of rot, began to clear. Its banks, once crowded with refuse, became places for walking, not gagging. The air itself grew thinner, less sour, and the people noticed, not with fanfare or parades, but in silence, in the small acts of life returning to normal. The laundry hung from windows dried more sweetly. Children played closer to the embankments. Market sellers no longer turned their carts away from the river's edge. The smell, that once inescapable force, faded to a memory, and with that memory fading, something deeper took root. A sense that cities could be managed, shaped, cared for, that the hidden things, the pipes, the drains, the water itself mattered just as much as palaces and parliaments, that even filth, when named and addressed, could be transformed. Health began to improve, not overnight, but measurably. Cholera, once a frequent visitor, grew quiet. There were still outbreaks, to be sure, but nothing like before. The tide had turned not through medicine, not through prayer, but through infrastructure. Doctors took note. Public health, once a vague ideal, became a science. Boards were formed, sanitation reports written. Cities across Britain looked to London and began to imagine their own solutions. And across the sea, in New York and Paris, engineers studied the intercepting sewers, the pumping stations, the graceful sweep of the embankments. They borrowed ideas, improved upon them, passed them on. What had begun as a crisis of smell became a global model. The stench had spoken, and the world had listened. But progress, as ever, was uneven. In the slums of Whitechapel and Lambeth, not every household was connected to the new system. Old privies still overflowed. Chamber pots still emptied into gutters in the early morning hours. The poor, as ever, received reform last, and yet, even here, the air was lighter, the floods less frequent, the fear of cholera receding like the disease itself. In time, as funds allowed, more streets were connected, more homes fitted with pipes. The system grew not because it was perfect, but because it worked, quietly, steadily, without needing praise. And what of Bazalgette? He retired from public life in the 1880s, his name known only to city planners and engineers. He received a knighthood, a pension, a few portraits, but mostly, he slipped into the background, as he always preferred. He spent his final years in Wimbledon, tending his garden, reading quietly, visiting work sites when invited. When asked what he was proudest of, he did not mention any one project. He simply said, "It works," and that was enough. When he died in 1891, he was buried at St. Mary's Church in Surrey. A modest headstone, no monument, no grand inscription, just a simple record of a life lived in service to systems few would ever see. But his work endures. Walk along the embankment today, and you still tread above his tunnels. Ride the district line through Westminster, and you follow the path carved by his intercepting sewers. Drink from a tap in Southwark, and you draw from a city shaped by his design. He remains with us not in marble, but in movement, not in memory, but in every flush, every drain, every unseen miracle of modern life. And perhaps that is the truest legacy, that in silence, in structure, in shadowed space, he gave a city its breath back. The great stink is gone now. Its scent, once so powerful it stopped Parliament, has faded from the stone. But the lesson lingers, that even the most overwhelming problems, those we ignore, deny, or try to perfume, can be faced. That dignity begins beneath our feet, and that sometimes the greatest hero of the city is a tunnel. It is just before 6 o'clock in the evening, in a large townhouse off Grosvenor Square. The lamps have been lit, candles flicker in sconces along the walls. The fire in the hearth is small more for ambience than heat. The drawing room is quiet now, save for the gentle ticking of a long case clock and the soft rustle of skirts in the hallway. Dinner will be served in 1 hour, and though no guests have yet arrived, the house is already alive with motion. Below stairs, the kitchen is warm with steam. Copper pots bubble. The scent of rich sauces stock. Wine, cream hangs in the air. A cook wipes her hands on her apron and barks an order to the scullery maid, who hurries with a tray of peeled root vegetables. A boy polishes silver at the back table, his cloth moving in slow, practiced circles. There is no shouting, not here, only quiet urgency. Everyone knows their role. Upstairs, a footman adjusts the position of the napkins. They are folded just so, creased sharply, arranged on white china trimmed with gilt. Glassware is already polished and placed precisely. Water, red wine, white wine, cordial, 6 forks, 5 knives, 2 spoons. The napkins are folded into swans tonight. The table glows beneath a lace runner, lined with polished candlesticks and tiny vases filled with hothouse flowers, roses and lilies, out of season, imported at great cost. The butler moves through the room like a shadow. He stops, tilts a fork 3 degrees, nods, continues. Dinner tonight will have 12 courses. The menu has been printed on card stock, in French: potage à la reine, saumon à la hollandaise, pate chaud de gibier, ready de buff, artichauts à la baragoule, fromage, sorbet citron, and more. Each course paired with a different wine, served from a decanter carried with white gloves. In the drawing room, Lady Mortimer, your hostess, sits for a moment of stillness. Her gown has been selected carefully, silk taffeta in deep green, a brooch of seed pearls pinned at her collarbone. Her hair is coiled elegantly, pinned with a tortoiseshell comb. She waits now for her guests, who will arrive at 7 sharp. They will be announced at the door by the butler, who knows each name, each title. He will not err. The guests will include 2 members of Parliament, the daughter of a baron, a naval captain returned from India, a widowed countess, and one Mr. Holmes, not Sherlock, of course, but a solicitor of rising fortune. They have dined here before. They know what to expect. The meal will last several hours. The conversation will begin with quiet inquiries, the state of the roads, the rumors from Vienna, the latest developments in Parliament. It will not be spontaneous. It will be crafted. Wit is welcomed, but never too sharp. Opinions may be offered, if they are not too new. Lady Mortimer knows this. She will ask about the captain's voyage at precisely the right time. She will offer the countess her preferred chair by the fire. She will place the solicitor beside the baron's daughter, to encourage an alliance. These are not accidents, they are arrangements, because dinner, in this world, is never just about food. It is theater, and the curtain is about to rise. The hallway clock chimes 7. The first carriage pulls up outside. The footman straightens his coat. The front door opens, and the night air enters, briefly cool, faintly scented with horse and fog. Voices rise. Coats are taken. Names are murmured, and the evening begins, softly, elegantly, with a bow, a smile, and the whisper of silk against polished wood. The doors to the dining room open without a creak, silently, as if trained, and the guests enter. They do not rush, each step is measured, each glance rehearsed. The ladies walk with shoulders gently back, their silk gowns gliding across the polished parquet floor. The gentlemen offer their arms to their partners. Gloves are removed discreetly, eyes are kept forward. A large table stretches before them, oval, covered in linen the color of cream. At its center, a low arrangement of cut flowers rests beside candelabra, whose flames flutter, but never flicker. The silver catches the light gently. There is no glare here, only shimmer. Place cards rest discreetly beside each charger. Seating has been determined with careful thought. Rank and relationship are observed. Lady Mortimer, the hostess, takes her place opposite her husband. At her right, the naval captain, who has recently returned from service. At her left, the Baron's daughter, Eliza. The solicitor, Mr. Holmes, finds himself beside Miss Eliza. This is not by chance. Dinner begins not with food, but with posture. Spines are straight but relaxed. Hands are placed lightly in the lap. Napkins are lifted together, quietly and unfolded with grace, not flapped, not flung. Conversation resumes in low tones. The sound in the room is a soft murmur never rising above the clinking of utensils. And then the first course arrives. It is soup potage à la reine, a creamy blend of chicken and almonds, strained to velvet. The footmen move in unison, clockwise around the table, serving from the left. Their gloves are white, their coats stiff with polish. They say nothing unless spoken to. Each bowl is placed with care, the ladle held steady. The spoons are to the right of the plate, smaller than usual, designed for sipping, not scooping. Guests begin to eat, but not all at once. They wait for Lady Mortimer to lift her spoon. She does so gently, without hesitation, and so the performance begins. Each course follows in rhythm, like movements in a symphony. Salmon à la hollandaise, poached salmon with the lemony sauce is served next. Then a game pate, still warm in its pastry crust, scented with rosemary and juniper. There is a pause for sorbet, delicately tart, to cleanse the palate. Conversation deepens. The captain describes the heat in Bombay, though modestly. The Baron's daughter speaks of her aunt's estate in Dorset, recently sold. Mr. Holmes, the solicitor, listens more than he speaks. But when he does, he mentions a case in the Chancery Court, nothing scandalous, but complex enough to suggest intellect. Lady Mortimer asks thoughtful questions. She nods, but never over-responds. Her role is to guide, not dominate. Her husband speaks rarely, but with assurance, mostly about Parliament, or estate taxes, or the difficulties of sourcing good stable hands since the last cold snap. The servants reappear. Ready buff roast beef is carved tableside, a spectacle in itself. The scent is rich but restrained. The plate garnished with root vegetables and a spoonful of horseradish cream. Wine is poured first white, then red, always quietly, always just enough, and all the while, the performance continues. No one eats too fast. No one finishes too much. The rules here are many, but silent. One does not salt the food before tasting it. That would imply a lack of trust in the kitchen. One never reaches. Instead, one asks softly. The request is carried down the line by others, passed like a whisper. Hands do not rest on the table, only the wrists, if needed. Laughter, if it comes, is gentle. It should not echo. A too loud laugh would feel as out of place as a wine glass struck in anger. There is no mention of money. There is no mention of labor. No one asks where the fish was caught, or who plucked the chickens, or how long the cook has been employed. These things are not part of the scene. They are the invisible hands that make it possible, but they are not acknowledged here. Instead, the focus remains on presentation, on performance, on appearing effortless. A dish of artichokes à la Barigol, stuffed artichokes with herbs and oil, is served. Then a delicate cheese course, presented with toast and candied walnuts. Finally, a dessert of molded jelly, tremulous, glossy, scented with rose water. It quivers as it is placed on the plate, catching the candlelight like amber glass. The guests admire it, but do not comment. Praise must be subtle, reserved. Only when Lady Mortimer offers a quiet, charming texture do others nod gently in agreement. The final drink is a cordial, a sharp, sweet digestive, poured into tiny glasses shaped like tulips. The meal is nearly over, and not once has a crumb been misplaced. The footmen clear the final plates. The napkins are folded once more, never rolled, never crumpled. Lady Mortimer rises. The ladies will retire to the drawing room, as tradition dictates. The gentlemen will remain for port and quiet conversation. Chairs are pushed back in perfect harmony. No one stumbles, no one coughs. The performance has ended its second act, and still, no one applauds, because this kind of theater is not meant for ovation, only for continuation. The meal is finished, and with it, the great machinery of dinner, the courses, the silver, the pauses. The practiced conversation has come to its end. But the evening is not over, no. In this world, one does not simply eat and go. There are rituals yet to be performed. The gentlemen remain seated in the dining room, their chairs turned slightly toward one another, forming a quiet semicircle around the decanter of port. The servants have retreated, their work done for now. The candles burn lower, casting a softer light. The room smells of wine and wood smoke, with a faint trace of beeswax from the polish on the sideboard. One man lights a cigar, another declines, with a gentle hand wave and a half smile. A third leans back, eyes half-lidded, listening more than speaking. Their conversation turns, as it often does, to property, rents, a proposal in Parliament regarding the tax on coal, a murmured joke about the Americans, still bristling with independence. Their voices remain low, not because they must, but because they are trained that way. The lower the tone, the higher the breeding, or so they believe. Meanwhile, the ladies have moved to the drawing room. It is slightly warmer here, with a smaller fire and more delicate furnishings. The air smells of lavender, infused in the drawer liners. A harp stands in one corner, though no one plays it tonight. Lady Mortimer sits nearest the fire, gently warming her hands. The Countess has taken a chair by the window, gazing without interest at the street lamps glowing in the mist. Miss Eliza and Mrs. Harrowfield, the Baron's cousin, exchange quiet remarks over a magazine the Queen folded neatly into. The talk here is of lacework, of charitable luncheons, of a new milliner on Oxford Street. One mentions the opera, another, the poor state of the garden roses after the recent rain. The tone is light, measured, always measured. Even the sighs are performed. But beneath the gentleness, something else lingers. Each woman wears a gown chosen for effect. Each word is offered with calculation. For while the world of men might move in laws and leases, this room holds its own kind of currency, softer, subtler, but no less powerful. Marriage prospects are weighed, family fortunes estimated in glances. Social rank is measured not just in land, but in the quality of silk, the freshness of flowers, the refinement of speech. Miss Eliza, for example, does not sit too close to Mr. Holmes at dinner by accident, nor was her dress of sky blue chosen without purpose, and Mr. Holmes, the rising solicitor, does not sip his port with that particular slowness unless he is aware that it is being noted. The drawing room, like the dining room before it, is a stage. The actors do not bow, but they never leave character. Lady Mortimer, for her part, watches it all with quiet attention. Her face reveals nothing. She has hosted these evenings for 25 years. She has seen fortunes rise and fall, reputations flicker and fade. She knows which guests return letters, which accept second invitations, which send flowers without prompting. She is the choreographer of silence, the curator of ease, and as she stirs her tea, she notes with satisfaction that tonight has gone smoothly. No scandal, no spilled wine, no arguments over reform, and no one left early. This is success. In this world, the absence of discomfort is victory. At last, the footman appears once more in the doorway. He does not speak, he simply nods. The gentlemen will rejoin the ladies now. They file in, one by one, offering polite remarks. Mr. Holmes finds his seat beside Miss Eliza once more. The naval captain leans near the Countess, asking about her time in Bath. The group reforms into a single whole. A final brandy is poured. A sweet is passed, candied fruit, wrapped in lace paper, and the hour draws late. Gradually, coats are fetched, gloves are donned, carriages are summoned. Each guest departs with quiet compliments, never too effusive. A lovely evening, they murmur, perfectly balanced. You must give Lady Mortimer my regards. The footman helps the ladies into their cloaks. The men bow with precision. No one forgets their hat outside. The night is cool and still. The gas lamps hiss softly. The horses snort in the mist. The city, so full of steam and noise by day, lies under a quilt of cloud and silence. The carriages roll away, the footsteps fade, and the house is quiet once more. Lady Mortimer remains in the drawing room a moment longer. She removes her earrings, unpins her hair, and finally, lets her spine soften. The mask slips not fully, but enough. Her husband appears in the doorway. They nod to each other. Briefly. Tomorrow, the linens will be cleaned, the silverware polished, the flowers replaced, and the invitations will begin again, because in this world, appearance is everything. Stillness is practiced, and behind every candlelit smile is the gentle weight of duty. Close your eyes now, if they aren't already. Let the images soften. The soot-streaked bricks of Whitechapel, the long, endless corridor of the blackened warehouse, The warm belly of a sewer tunnel, the polished surface of a dinner table untouched by need. These places, all of them, were real. They held breath and hunger and thought. They were filled with people like you, like me. They lived lives of structure, of repetition, of quiet endurance. They rose early. They worked hard. They made do. Their stories were not grand epics, not battles or crowns or conquests, but something more ordinary and more lasting: routine, resilience, rhythm. And that rhythm carries on, not in textbooks or tours, but in us, in the way we cherish comfort, in the way we notice the smell of fresh air, in the way we wonder, late at night, how others lived long ago. History is not loud. It does not shout. It waits in tenement corners and city drains, in dusty books and silver forks, in the stillness. And so, as you rest now, your body still, your mind quietude, are part of that rhythm, not separate from history, but surrounded by it, safe within it, and carried forward gently. Thank you for being here tonight. Sleep, if it finds you now, is not a departure from the past, but a return to it, a soft dissolving of boundaries between then and now. May you rest peacefully, and when you wake, may the world feel just a little deeper, a little slower, and a little more known. Good night.